Welcome and thank you for taking the time to learn about this important topic. Tonight, Colin and I are going to be covering blue bin and special recycling. My name is Jessie Ruth Corkins, and I'm the outreach coordinator for the Solid Waste District.
And I'm Colin Clark. I'm the Eco AmeriCorps member for the Addison County Solid Waste Management District. Briefly, what we'll cover tonight, we'll start out with kind of the state of recycling, some issues, some problems it's facing, as well as then we'll go into the do's and don'ts, the nitty gritty of what does and doesn't go in your blue bin. Then we'll go into some special recycling that's required by Vermont law before ending with a Q&A session where we can answer some of your great questions you registered with, as well as some things that might come up. So to begin with, the state of recycling, some challenges recycling faces. And the biggest one is there's a lot of confusion with recycling, and that's due to the rules not being universal. So it's really up to the different waste districts and municipalities to kind of meet the state goals and whatnot. The good news is that across Vermont, the blue bin recycling is pretty universal. So all that we're going to say is true for Vermont. However, it might not be true if you leave the state. Another challenge is the China SOAR policy. So before this policy was enacted in 2018, we sent a lot of our recycling stream to China and a lot of East Asian countries. But since this policy was enacted, they're not taking a lot of our waste due to their industrializing society, as well as our waste stream being relatively contaminated. And that's really made us deal with our own recycling stream, which I argue is a good thing, or I believe. But it does mean that our domestic markets and our infrastructure regarding recycling is relatively weak, and it's still growing. It's got to keep pace with the recycling we do produce. Plastic everywhere. It's everywhere. And the United States has a bit of a plastic problem. It's said that if current production rates and disposal rates continue, by 2050, the market value will triple, as well as there will be more plastic in the ocean than fish. And this has not been helped at all by COVID. So and when COVID began, we see a drop in oil prices, which has made it much cheaper to produce plastic out of virgin petroleum rather than recycled content. And just some caveats why we should recycle. It's great for the environment. It reduces how much we send to the landfill and incinerators. It conserves a valuable natural resource, and it prevents pollution through mitigation of decaying waste in a landfill, as well as transportation costs it takes to get material to a landfill. It's good for the economy as well. It moves towards a circular economy, one that mirrors nature. It also creates more jobs and saves energy. And I'm sure most people have heard the reduce, reuse, recycle, or as well as the refuse, reduce, reuse, recycle, and rot. And if you'll see here that recycle in both of these models is relatively low on the hierarchy. So we really try and advocate for people to reduce and reuse as much as they can before they recycle. And when they are recycling, just make sure you're following the rules of recycling. And a big question a lot of people have is the chasing arrow symbol, or that little recycling triangle in the bottom of a lot of packaging. And this actually doesn't indicate a product's recyclability. It is used by a marketing tool, I would argue, to greenwash a lot of packaging, but it actually refers to the resin code used to make the plastic. So hypothetically, all those numbers, you get the 1 through 7s in that little triangle, they're all recyclable. However, the recycling facilities don't necessarily all have the same equipment and technology. They're not all created equal. So that's why you get different recycling rules in different areas. And recycling facilities, or the materials recovery facilities, or MRFs. We have 2 in Vermont. One is up in Williston, and the other one's down in Rutland. And they kind of have 3 main principles. They have workers, machinery, and markets. So the blue bin recycling comes into the workers, and the workers pick off valuable recycling as well as some contaminants. Then that material goes to machinery where it's sorted into different waste streams before finally getting baled and sent out into the markets for new products and projects as well.
Awesome. So I'm going to take over for Colin and just talk about what does and doesn't go in your blue bin. So in Vermont, we've got 4 major categories of items that do belong in your blue bin. And then there's specifics to each of kind of the categories. So those are, of course, paper, plastic, metal, and glass. And the key with anything that's going to go in is it's got to be empty, clean, and dry. So in terms of paper products that belong in your blue bin, we'll start out with this category first. Printer paper, newspaper, magazines, junk mail, including the envelopes with the plastic windows. Those can go in as is. Tubes that you might find in toilet paper or paper towels, box boards, so a tissue box, even freezer boxes, cracker boxes. Those are all examples of box board that can go in, as well as maybe a to-go drink tray, brown paper bags that are more common since the bag ban, and cardboard, of course, once it's flattened. So we get a lot of questions about frozen food and pizza boxes, and these are 2 acceptable items in your blue bin. With pizza boxes, the rule of thumb is that a little grease is okay, but no stuck-on food. So I'm under the impression that the visual kind of right here would be acceptable, but any more grease than this or any larger amounts of food, you'd need to rip that part away and put that part in the trash and recycle the rest. And frozen food boxes, there's nothing special about these. They're very similar to the cracker box in your cupboard, and that's because the food inside is actually wrapped in something else, whether it's plastic or an ice cream sandwich wrapper, and that's really preserving the freshness. So these boxes can go right in, but ice cream cartons can't, and we'll get to more on why. So in terms of a few other paper items that can go in, but you've got to kind of be aware of the caveats. One is wrapping paper and greeting cards. So uncoated wrapping paper, like you see in the picture, even with a beautiful print on it, is okay to go in your recycling bin and should actually. But if you were ever a little worried that there might be an extra layer, a plastic layer, this is a great time to talk about with any paper product, you can do a slow tear test. And if some plastic you start to see a plastic layer pull away from the paper layer, then you know it's a layered paper and that should go in the trash because MRFs can't separate the layers and layered paper is not valuable as a recyclable. So uncoated wrapping paper is great. Plain greeting cards are great, but just watch out for the musical devices and watch out for ribbons or bows or glitter or foil or mylar. Those things are trash. Shredded paper, as most people have caught on, this can go in your recycling bin, and it's the only time we encourage folks to put a bag in the recycling. So you want to put it in a clear bag and tie it shut so it makes its way there safely and intact. And then it's in a clear bag so it's visible to those workers. And they're going to pull it off before it goes through the whole process and get it recycled because it's actually generally contains high value paper for them, unlike the mixed stuff with junk mail. And then paperback books can also go in your blue bin as is. It's hardcover books that can't. You'd either have to rip away the inside pages and throw the hardcover in the trash, or you can bring all your books to the district transfer station because we do have a special collection bin for those. And a couple quick examples of paper items that don't belong in your blue bin. Number one is food contact paper. This is often a layered paper. You kind of know that because you don't get drippings on yourself when you're eating out of these containers or off these things. And the MRFs can't separate those layers. So even when they're clean, and especially when they're dirty, they belong in the trash. Paper cups of any type. The key here is that because this paper holds a liquid, it's a layered paper and MRFs don't want the layered papers. And that moves me into cartons. So these can sometimes have up to 4 layers, including maybe an aluminum layer. They're built to preserve product freshness, and they're not built to be recyclable in kind of our current state of recycling. So these here in Vermont are trash, whether it's juice cartons, milk or alternative milk cartons, broth containers, ice cream cartons. You can think of ice cream as like a frozen liquid, if that helps. And finally, napkins and paper towels and tissue paper and toilet paper. All the fibers in these are too short to get turned into new paper, so these also don't belong in your blue bin. Moving on to plastic, here's some examples of plastic items that do belong in your blue bin. White coffee cup lids, clamshell packaging, including berry containers, jugs and tubs. So the key here is just making sure you get them clean. Laundry detergent or soap jugs, often there can be leftover residue. So definitely get some water in there, shake them up, and try to reuse what you can. And then cups from fast food joints or party cups with a quick rinse, those are perfectly recyclable, as well as typical bottles and bigger bottles. And you don't need to remove the labels, although you can if you'd like to. But they're what we refer to as an acceptable amount of contamination. And here's a couple examples similar to what I just did with paper, where these items, they've got to meet a certain criteria to go in. So one is 5-gallon buckets. They've got to be clean, and there can't be a metal handle attached. You either got to remove that, and if you can't, or you can't get it clean, it belongs in the trash. But this is about the biggest an item can be that can go in your 5-gallon, your blue bin. Next up are caps and lids. And if you've got a question, feel free to throw it in the chat and we'll definitely get to it at the end, but I'm not going to monitor that right now. So with caps and lids, get lots of questions, and the old mantra, which was good and still holds true, is the cap is generally made of a different type of plastic than the bottle. But MRFs tell us they want the plastic. So in order to get those little itty bitty bottle caps recycled and through the process into a plastic bale, you've got to reattach them to the bottle. And the rule here is if something's at least 2 inches in diameter or 2 inches in 2 directions, it can go in loose. So a peanut butter cap can probably go in loose, but if you'd like to, it's a great idea to reattach those two. And finally, when you think about peanut butter containers and other food containers, they've just got to be clean. So if you don't have the time or somebody's not taking the time, you do want to fish out the dirty ones and see if you can't make time to clean them. And then some examples of plastic items that don't go in your blue bin, and we'll take a quick deep dive into these. And my hope is that by talking about them a little bit more, the reasons why stick with you. Durable plastics. Plastics that contain a hazardous chemical, little plastics, plastic bags, compostable plastic, and styrofoam. So starting off with styrofoam, why this doesn't belong in your blue bin. And it's less and less common in Vermont because of the latest law, but that's a great thing in my opinion. So styrofoam is the brand name for expanded polystyrene, and this is kind of what it sounds like. It is blown plastic, so there's a lot of air in a styrofoam cup or container. And when you melt this down, you get a very, very small amount of plastic. So it's not very valuable to MRFs, and it does require special equipment as well as a critical mass, which we're not generating in Vermont. So these aren't currently recyclable here. So instead, if you do have styrofoam, we encourage you to reuse what you can, but otherwise it belongs in the trash. Next up are plastic bags and film plastic. So film plastic, I'm indicating bendable plastic. So a prime envelope is a bendable film plastic. Another example is a chip bag. All of these or certain types of these are what we call tanglers, and they tangle in the machinery at a MRF. And sometimes they require the MRFs to have to shut down multiple times a day to get these untangled from the equipment. So a couple things to note: don't bag your recycling. We want you to keep it loose in the bin when you give it to your hauler, or put it in paper bags if you need to. There are take-back programs for certain plastic films, and you can learn more about that on our website, or give us a shout in any way and we'll tell you more about that. Otherwise, in general, these items are trash. This is what it looks like when a bunch of residents and businesses do send a MRF a lot of plastic bags and other tanglers. I do see some rope in this picture. So this is a spinning Stardust screen, and generally the stuff in your blue bin when it's on this screen is getting sorted by density. Stuff that's thin and papery goes in one direction, and containers and 3D objects go in another. But when there's a bunch of plastic bags, this can't do its job. And so they have to shut down the whole MRF, and a couple people with box cutters have to fish this stuff out. So, we encourage you to help us get the word out there that don't put plastic bags in your blue bin. Another example of something that doesn't belong in your blue bin, as we've already kind of talked about, are small items. These are just going to fall through the cracks. So we want you to keep in mind the rule of 2. In order for something to fly through the recycling process, it's got to be at least 2 inches in 2 dimensions. And the reason that the fork and the straw don't qualify, even though they're 2 inches long, they're not 2 inches thick or 2 inches wide. So they're just going to fall through. We encourage you to put the caps back on bottles. Otherwise, any of this stuff belongs in the trash. Next up are durable items, and this is a wide variety of products. They're made to last. They're often made of different plastics or other materials bonded together. And the key takeaway is that our MRFs are set up to handle a lot of the containers and packaging that comes into our life, and not to necessarily recycle all of the durable goods. So what you can't use or don't need anymore, we encourage you to donate it. Otherwise, if it's not in donatable condition, certainly it just belongs in the trash. And then compostable plastics. This one, it was news to me when I learned it. They're growing in popularity here in Vermont, but they're not designed to be recycled in the typical sense. True plastic can be melted down and remade into a new plastic product, but because compostable plastic is designed to biodegrade and disappear under heat and temperature, this shouldn't go in your blue bin because it's not designed to be made into more biodegradable plastic. So sometimes it's hard to tell if you've got a compostable cup in your hand. So we encourage you to always just check the bottom. It will say if it's a PLA plastic, which indicates compostable. And if so, and you're not going to reuse it, it belongs in the trash. It doesn't belong in the composting stream here in Addison County, and it won't break down in your backyard pile. And then the last kind of category of plastics that don't belong in your blue bin are oiled and hazardous fluid containers. So this includes motor oil and automotive chemicals, pool chemicals, or anything caustic or corrosive. And a skull crossbone sign is a good way to tell. But all of these, even when they're empty or you think they're empty, they belong in the trash when they're done, just because it's not safe to necessarily send these through with so many people working on the line. So instead, if there are leftovers in any of these, you can bring them to that Haz Waste Center. If they're coming from your household, it's free to drop them off at the Haz Waste Center. Otherwise, empty containers belong in the trash. And moving on to metal, so we're almost done. These are metal items that do belong in your blue bin. Pie pans, aluminum foil, bakeware, aluminum foil wrappers, including a yogurt wrapper, or say wrappers around chocolates that you might get around Easter time, and tin foil. The goal here, though, is that we want you to get it into a 3D object. Because if it goes in flat, it does behave like paper at a MRF and can contaminate paper loads. So keeping in mind that something's got to be at least 2 inches in 2 dimensions, we want you to get your ball, save up that aluminum foil, and wait till it's at least a 2-inch ball before you throw it in your blue bin. And then food and hygiene aerosol cans, when they're empty, we'd love for you to put those in your blue bin, as well as, of course, canned goods. Don't need to remove the label, but you can if you want to. And then soda containers can go in your blue bin. So here's a couple examples of metal items that don't belong in your blue bin. Durable items, kind of items made to last in funky shapes. These metal items aren't containers or packaging in the typical sense, so you'd want to keep them out of the blue bin. As well as pressurized cylinders. We have a specific program for those at the district transfer station. Batteries as well, keep those out because they can be potentially a fire hazard. And then while a paint can is certainly an example of a container and packaging, because it contained a hazardous chemical, these are trash when they're empty. And then a fridge is way too big, but Colin will talk more about those. And last category is glass. So here's some examples of glass items that do belong in your blue bin. And those are glass bottles and jars, glass juice containers, beer bottles if you want to, wine bottles, wine coolers. You don't have to take off the labels, but it's cool if you do. And then finally, here's some examples of glass items that don't belong. This includes mirrors, picture frame glass, ceramics, and Pyrex. Pyrex is a coated glass and it doesn't shatter the same way. It's not the type of glass that MRFs market. And finally, if you have broken glass in your house, we encourage you to keep it out, put that in the trash. It's one thing if glass breaks when it's moving from a truck to another truck, for instance, or from your blue bin to a truck, but we don't want you to put it in directly. So lastly, a couple blue bin takeaways, and then Colin will take over. Keeping in mind your blue bin is designed to handle containers and packaging and get those recycled, as well as keeping in mind the rule of 2. So in order for something to get through the recycling process and get into a marketable recycling bale, it's got to be at least 2 inches in 2 dimensions and no bigger than 2 feet in 2 dimensions. No film, no foam, no food, no tanglers, including clothing, rope, plastic bags, and nothing toxic or combustible. All right, so Colin's going to take over and then we'll move into Q&A.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about the special recycling in Vermont. So this kind of recycling is required by Vermont law. So these items are banned from the landfill, so should not go in your trash, but also shouldn't go in your blue bin. They can be brought to the district transfer station for our special recycling. And something really cool about Vermont is they have a lot of product stewardship laws, which require producers of certain goods to take responsibility for the disposal of them or recycling. So some of these items can be brought for free to the transfer station. And the first category I'm going to talk about are batteries, lithium metal batteries, which are common household low power batteries. You probably find them in like your TV remote or clocks, and they are reactive, so they can be combustible. So you want to keep them out of your trash. Lead acid wet cell batteries are larger. They power motor vehicles often or larger power devices. And they have sulfuric acid, which is dangerous in a landfill. Button coin cells look like the little coins. You can often find them in medical devices such as hearing aids or pacemakers. Alkaline and carbon zinc batteries, these are your run-of-the-mill low power batteries that you can be found in your flashlight or other household appliances, and they're actually not banned from the landfill, but we would encourage community members to bring them to the transfer station for special recycling. Last kind of batteries are nickel cadmium and nickel metal hydride. These are rechargeable batteries you find maybe in e-devices, your phone, your computer, as well as electronic like appliances such as like a drill. And all these items are, besides the alkaline and carbon zinc, are banned from the landfill, should be brought to the district transfer station for special recycling, or you can visit the Call to Recycle website, which has locations maybe closer to you that are able to dispose properly of these items. And our next category is electronic waste. Vermont is really cool as well because we have an e-cycles program, one of only 24 states, which requires producers of electronic waste to take responsibility for these items. So computers, computer peripherals such as keyboards, mouses, anything that plugs into your computer can be brought to the transfer station for free, as well as printers and TVs, fax, other kinds of those ones. But telephones, VCR, CD players, radios, electronic game consoles, power chips, and computer chips, these are all items that are banned from the landfill, so shouldn't go in your trash, your blue bin, but should be brought to the district transfer station for a small fee. So you can collect these and put them in a paper bag and bring them to the transfer station, and we will charge $5 per bag. The next category is mercury containing devices. So these are majority light bulbs, such as, thank you. Fluorescent light bulbs and tubes, compact fluorescent light bulbs, UV radiation tubes, metal halide bulbs, sodium bulbs, high density discharge bulbs, as well as old thermostats and old thermometers. And a lot of people think that, myself included, that all light bulbs contain mercury. However, LEDs and incandescents can be placed in your trash. They don't contain mercury. All these ones listed, though, however, do. If you're ever wondering if a light bulb contains mercury or not, you can see on the screen in the right-hand corners, there's that HG symbol, and that can be found on the bottom of a lot of light bulbs, and that indicates that there's mercury in the light bulb. As well as old thermostats. Old thermostats often contain mercury, and there's a $5 rebate actually if you bring them to transportation, which is, I think, is cool. And old thermometers also sometimes have mercury, and all of these should be kept from the landfill and brought for special disposal to the district transfer station. And finally, a few other categories are leaf and yard waste, as well as natural wood waste and food waste. So these materials decay really quickly and really easily, and if they decay in an anaerobic environment, so if they don't have access to air, like in the landfill, they release methane, which is a very potent and strong greenhouse gas. So we really try and keep them out of the landfill, and they're pretty easy to just compost in your backyard. Can also be brought to the district transfer station for a minimal fee and composted with our composting partner, or we will, such as for natural wood waste, chip it up into a mulch that you could come back and use later. Tires are also banned from landfill. They're used, melted down, and used in a variety of paving projects to improve road quality. Scrap metal is banned from the landfill, and this would differs from what Jesse was talking about, because Jesse was talking about metal that is really used for packaging that goes in your blue bin. This is more like durable metals. So a good rule to follow, if it's larger than a cubic foot or weighs more than 25 pounds, it should be brought to the district transfer station for special recycling. And we dispose of them for free. We melt them down, or not us per se, but we make sure that they're utilized properly. Appliances also, so fridges, dishwashers, AC units, all those big appliances can be brought for free to the district transfer station unless they contain cooling devices such as Freon or CFCs. Then it'll be a $15 fee per unit.
Awesome. So we have come to the end of our presentation on blue bin and special recycling. And the motto for Blue Bin Recycling is, when in doubt, keep it out. And if you do have questions, I'm going to pull up our website because it's one of those resources that is available 24/7, even though, you know, we might not be available as human beings. So when you get to our homepage, which is addisoncountyrecycles.org, right on the you know, the front page here in the left corner is a searchable A to Z guide where we've got hundreds of items, everyday items that people ask questions about. What do they do with it? Does it belong in my blue bin? Is it banned from the landfill? Is it toxic? We might have the answer there. So if you were looking to know how much it costs to bring tires to the district transfer station, we've got that keyworded, and you could find our current prices here, which obviously there's a tiered rate based on the size of the tire, but this is a great resource to answer questions like what to do with glass, say. So pane glass, yeah, we've got a lot of pages. Anyways, we'll open it up for Q&A now, and if you're welcome